Saturday night was a rough night for Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks. What all went wrong? What were a few of the things that actually went right? And how much blame lies on the coaching staff's shoulders? We're going to dive into all of that on this special live edition of Locked On Gamecocks.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Gamecock Nation, and welcome to this special live game recap edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks every single day. I'm Andrew Lyon, the host of this podcast, and you can find my written work over on Gamecocks Digest on si.com. Thank y'all so much for making the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first listen or watch here today. We are free and available, as always, both on YouTube and wherever you get your audio podcasts daily. This live show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. That game was a rough one for Shane Beamer and South Carolina. And honestly, for a lot of you, I could probably just make that one statement and end the show right here, and we could all move on with the rest of our days. But that's not what I'm going to do on this show. As tough as it is when these kind of games occur, I'm going to dive into what all happened last night. I'm going to dive into what all went wrong. We're going to touch on a few of the players that did stand out on this team because it wasn't all bad. And we'll also discuss maybe what the staff needs to consider doing moving forward. Maybe some of the plans they should implement for the Furman game in terms of trying to figure out which guys can step up at certain spots for this team. So let's start off with probably the elephant in the room coming out of this North Carolina game. The Gamecocks have a few serious long-term issues on this team right now that likely will not be solved quickly, and those issues lie primarily in the trenches. Let's start with the offensive line. This offensive line is going to be a bigger problem than I think we all expected it to be. Now, I will admit, coming into this season, I did not ever say that I thought this offensive line was going to do good. I definitely did not ever say that I thought they were going to do great. I did think that this offensive line was going to be a bit of an inconsistent up and down unit, but I did think that this could be an offensive line that was serviceable, much like the offensive lines have been for South Carolina for the last year or two. Never great, but at least at times when you needed them to be serviceable, they were. Saturday night, this offensive line unit was just flat out not good enough, especially at the offensive tackle position. In terms of pass protection, the offensive tackle spot was just downright bad. The guys that South Carolina brought in, and I'll discuss this in more detail later on in the show, they did not show a lot of promise against a defense that last year ranked in the 90s or in the 100s in the majority of major statistical categories on the defensive side of the ball. This staff is going to have to experiment a little bit, in my opinion, with this Furman game coming up. This would be a perfect time to do it. Granted, Furman is a very good football team. They are, I think, a top 10 team in terms of the FCS rankings right now. So you certainly, especially after what North Carolina did to you in the trenches, you cannot sleep on the Paladins at all. You can't. But I do think this staff needs to think about, even after just 1 week, making some tweaks, making some changes in terms of the personnel and starting lineup. Tree Babalade, one of the highly touted true freshman offensive linemen for the 2023 class. I believe he dressed for the North Carolina game. He was there in Charlotte. He did not play, from what I can recall. But Tree Babalade is progressing well in practice, and the coaching staff deems him to be ready to go out there and at least see what he can do, I think they need to do that this week. I don't think they need to put it off. If you think Tree Babalati can go out there and his confidence is going to be wrecked, again, especially against what is on the schedule, one of your easier opponents for this entire season, you need to go ahead and see what he's got. Because quite frankly, the veterans in front of him, I don't know how much more they're going to offer. Just don't. In terms of the offensive guard positions, I was a bit surprised that Ja'Kai Moore was starting at right guard on Saturday. I don't think Ja'Kai Moore has ever played at right guard that I can recall in all the years he's been here at South Carolina. I know he's played at right tackle. I know he's played at left tackle. I know he's played at left guard. I can't recall a single game in which he's ever played right guard. And the thing is, Ja'Kai Moore's strength is his pass blocking. And it's going to sound stupid simplistic, but if you've got an offensive lineman who strengths pass blocking, you typically want them on the left side of the line of scrimmage. Nick Gargiulo is supposed to be extremely versatile. I do believe that. I think he is. He can play pretty much any spot on the interior. Maybe you consider flipping those two for this next game and seeing if that helps you out. Or maybe you bump out Ja'Kai Moore back to right tackle and you see what maybe Marquis Anderson can do once he comes back. He did not make the trip for the North Carolina game. Don't know if that was maybe any sort of issue or violation. Again, not trying to speculate, or if it was an injury. We just don't know. But Shane Beamer did not say anything from what I can recall about him being out in terms of injuries for this game. So interested to maybe hear or see what Shane Beamer has to say, whether it's his Sunday night teleconference call later today or his Tuesday press conference on what else is going on with Marquis Anderson's situation. You could also maybe consider putting Tyshawn Wanamaker inside. Maybe put him at right guard. And again, still have Ja'Kai Moore go out to right tackle. Point being, you've got to shake things up front. Because these offensive tackles, for the most part, they're not going to get it done for you right now. They just aren't. That might sound like an overreaction to some of you, but y'all, North Carolina, I think, had 17 sacks all year in 2022. They got 9 on Saturday night. And I can only recall maybe 1 or 2 of them that were on Spencer Rattler. 1 or 2. Everybody else, or all the other sacks, I should say, in my opinion, was on the offensive line. I still got to go back and watch the game. Maybe my opinion changes on that a little bit. But the O-line did not help out their quarterback. Run game never stood a chance. Run game had absolutely no chance to ever establish a rhythm in this game. And even when there were plays where Takarion Joyner had space to work with, Takarion could not break tackles or shake guys loose. And again, I know it's one game, but that position group, it looks like that the questions that people had about that position unit this offseason, they're valid. They're valid, as far as I can tell. Mario Anderson nor DJ Braswell got carries in this game, and that was a bit surprising to me, considering all the talk about running back by committee, and then none of those guys saw a snap on Saturday night. Question that as well. Defensive line was not disruptive at all against the Tar Heels offensive line. They never had control of this game on their side of the ball. In the 60 minutes played, South Carolina recorded 1 tackle for loss on defense. 1 in 60 minutes of play. North Carolina converted 8 of their 13 third down attempts. South Carolina had chances to get off the field. Multiple chances. And they just couldn't get the job done. And at times, if they did get off the field, it quite frankly was because they got lucky and Drake Maye overthrew a man. Like the 4th down conversion attempt that the Tar Heels had, I believe, in the first half on South Carolina's 20-something yard line. They were right there around the red zone, or they were in the red zone, and Drake Maye just flat out missed a pass to his receiver. His receiver dropped it, but they were wide open. They had South Carolina's defensive back beat by 2-3 steps, and they just didn't make it happen. Going back to the D-line, they could not get off blocks at all, and in my opinion, that was extremely disappointing, especially with that defensive tackle group that I've talked so much about going into this season. A group that is deep, a group that's talented, led by Tonka Hemingway. I expected a lot out of this group, and I thought this group could make a real impact in this game. They didn't do squat. And no offense, At the Power 5 level, you're no longer good enough by just sitting there maintaining your gap integrity and not letting the lineman blow you off the line by 5 yards. That's not good enough. At some point, some of those guys have got to be disruptors and game wreckers, and South Carolina didn't get that at all against North Carolina. And that was a unit, by the way, that last year gave up 40 sacks. The pass rush was non-existent. I know North Carolina's offensive coordinator had a good game plan. He called a lot of quick passes. They had some 6-7 man protections that they called at times. Kudos to Chip Lindsey because he outcoached Clayton White. That was very evident. And South Carolina, it just felt like they never even got close to Drake Maye. You can't have that. You just can't have that. So to put it bluntly, the play in the trenches was abysmal on Saturday night, and there's no other way of getting around it. Now, as I said at the beginning, it was not all bad. There were some positives to take away from this game, specifically with a couple of skill position players on both offense and defense, and I'm going to touch on that in just a couple of moments. Today's show is brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. Now, time for your game changer of the week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. Much like Spencer Rattler, Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. Spencer Rattler threw for 353 passing yards while completing 76.9% of his passes on Saturday night. Athletic Brewing Company brews over 50 styles of craft non-alcoholic beers, including IPAs, golden sours, and more. And the best part is you'll never have hangovers when you have their non-alcoholic beers. You can find Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic brews at a store near you or buy online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use code LOCKEDON to get 15% off of your first order. That's code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. All right, thank you all for tuning into this special live reaction edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your team every single day. And if you're an everydayer tuning in, as always, thank you for making us your first choice for South Carolina Gamecock sports coverage. Now, moving on from the trenches to the skill positions on both sides of the ball, there were some highlights and there were some lowlights as far as those positions were concerned. To start off with the offense, a huge round of applause to Spencer Rattler and Xavier Legette. Those two guys showed up on Saturday night. Spencer Rattler, everyone talks about how he didn't do good enough in 2022, and sure, part of the reason that Spencer Rattler's stat line looked so bad heading into the Tennessee game was because he had a hard time in some ways trusting a pro-style offense. At the same time, outsiders don't understand how much Marcus Satterfield, in my opinion, had a negative impact on Spencer Rattler and how much he was thinking instead of doing on the field, a la Nick Sirianni right there. But Spencer Rattler, his pocket navigation was really good on Saturday. There was only one time in terms of the sacks where Spencer Rattler, in my opinion, sort of got himself into trouble running backwards into a bunch of North Carolina defensive box players. But besides that one sack, I thought that his poise was really good. I thought his pocket awareness was really good. He scrambled for a bunch of yards. I thought Spencer Rattler played really well in this game. He is not the reason South Carolina lost. A lot of times in 2022, you could sit there and say Rattler did not help his team win. But that's not going to be the case this year. And the sad thing is, Spencer Rattler just might not get enough help from this offensive line. It's really a shame to have to admit that, but Spencer Rattler looks like he is finally living up to the potential that we all thought he had when he came to Columbia. But he did get a whole lot of help. He did get help, though, from Xavier Legette at wide receiver. Props to Xavier Legette. This man, so many times, he could have decided to transfer elsewhere. He could have decided that he was done with football. But Xavier Legette came back for one more year. He felt like that he still had more to give. And if he plays like he did on Saturday night, he'll be an all-SEC player, no doubt. Xavier Legette, I believe, had 170-plus receiving yards on 7 or 8 catches. He was phenomenal. He made big-time grabs with a defender right there on him. He made guys miss after the catch, got yards after contact. Xavier Legette was a true number one wide receiver in all honesty, on Saturday night. That's not to take away from Juice Wells. That's not me trying to say that Juice Wells had better worry because Xavier Legette's right on his heels. Not saying that. But it's a great development in terms of the wide receiver room and Spencer Rattler and the connection that those two have together, because we still need to see Xavier Legette go out there and show that he was ready to take a bigger role in this offense, and he more than answered the call on Saturday night against North Carolina. So great job, Xavier Legette. At the same time, where are all the other wide receivers? Where are you? Juice Wells, I'll go ahead and say, I don't think he was 100%. I think we got a bit misled by Shane Beamer as far as his health stats was concerned, because Juice Wells eventually left the game and did not return. I don't think that means he's going to be out for the next week necessarily, but again, we'll sort of wait and see how this week progresses and unfolds in terms of what his status is. Amarian Brown had a couple of nice little swing and screen passes that he took for significant amounts of yards down the field. I thought he played well in terms of the role that he had. He also left the game at one point and did not return. Omega Blake, I didn't hear his name a whole lot. Elijah Caldwell, I know, traveled with the team. Granted, he's a true freshman, but would have liked to see him get maybe a little bit more involved or maybe get a little bit more of a chance at the end of the game when it was pretty much decided. Trey Knox and Joshua Simon, didn't see a whole lot of those two either. And those two guys were talked about a lot this offseason, and I bought in terms of what kind of talent this tight end room has. And maybe you could sit there and say, well, part of it was because of the offensive line. I'd definitely be willing to listen to that, but I just feel like that Trey Knox and Joshua Simon, for at least in terms of game one, their impact was minimal in terms of the passing game. Luke Doty is also a good story in this game because he went out there and made a couple plays in the fourth quarter, made some big-time catches, took some contact as well. Kudos to Luke Doty. However, Luke Doty is a former quarterback, or I shouldn't say former quarterback. I take that back. Please take what I just said with a grain of salt. I misspoke there. Luke Doty is a quarterback that is playing wide receiver currently at the same time right now. That's what I should have said. Where are the other wideouts? Where are some of the guys that have been in this program for several years now? They're not true freshmen. A couple of them didn't even dress and come with the team to Charlotte. Where are some of those guys at? Wide receiver recruiting, I'm telling y'all, I've sent out this alarm bell twice on this show. It is starting to show up a little bit. And after this year, if things don't get better this offseason in terms of maybe recruiting the transfer portal, which you're going to have to do if you're this staff, it's going to be worse. Because again, Luke Doty playing wide receiver, making plays, got no issue with that. But it's also not a good sign in terms of the depth at that position, in my opinion. It really isn't. Round of applause to Stone Blanton and Debo Williams on the defensive side of the ball. I thought they played their hearts out. I thought that they had played a really good game. No, they probably didn't play perfect. They probably had a couple plays where maybe they went into the wrong gap. They got a little too antsy. But those guys were flying around. Those guys looked athletic. They were running sideline to sideline. That's the best that linebacker position, in my opinion, has looked in several years. I thought those two guys played really well, and they had to play the entire game because Mo Kaba apparently not ready to play significant snaps. He got dinged up, could not play the rest of the game. You're seeing a recurring trend there with injuries. I'll definitely jump on that later in the show as well. And Pup Howard, didn't see a whole lot of him, but again, he's a true freshman. Give him a little bit of time. He'll get acclimated. He'll make more of an impact, in my opinion, as the year goes on. But props to those guys because they played their hearts out, and I thought that they prevented North Carolina from stringing too many explosive plays in terms of the ground game. Secondary, we learned on Saturday night the secondary is going to have some growing pains for the first time in a little while. The losses of Cam Smith and Darius Rush are probably going to hurt a little bit more than we thought that would. And the thing to keep in mind is North Carolina was down two of their top three wide receivers heading into this game. Tez Walker, we all have heard about that 1,000 times now. Don't need to rehash that. They also did not have Nate McCollum, who, from what I was told from our North Carolina host in Locked On's network, Isaac Shade, is one of their top three wide receivers on this team. But you would have been able to tell that at times, the fact that both those guys were absent. The secondary had too many coverage busts, multiple busts that led to explosive plays for this Tar Heel offense. And I have to admit, I kind of thought they would pick up right where they left off. And seems like I was a little bit wrong on that. Now, losing a Nick Emenworry literally at the beginning of the game does not help your secondary at all. Definitely acknowledge that. Jalen Kilgore, a true freshman, having to play a significant amount of snaps, basically the whole game, does not help you. Keenan Nelson Jr., maybe he needs a little more time than we figured, since it's only his second year, and that was really only his second big-time game in terms of the amount of snaps he played. North Carolina also had a lot of quick passes, and they established a decent ground attack, which made it easier for them to go after this secondary. It definitely did. And in terms of the rush defense, I know it's all 11, and the coaches preach that all the time with that unit. In my opinion, rush defense has to start with a defensive front. You can't always have your defensive backs having to go in there and make plays. I thought that they had their moments on Saturday night. But again, one tackle for loss, just not going to cut it. I know I'm bouncing around a little bit, but point being, secondary, the growing pains are going to be a little bit more prevalent than we would have imagined heading into this season. So there's obviously some blame to go around here. And I just talked about some of the bad play that some of these position groups had. But the coaches deserve a massive share of the blame pie, in my opinion, in different ways. And I'll touch on which ways, where they need to improve, and what all maybe led to this performance in just a couple of moments. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy, and you can bet on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of the NFL. Okay, let's talk about how much blame this coaching staff deserves, because Shane Beamer, look, I know that fans might not care as much about this, but he did say in his post-game presser, he took a lot of the blame, and he and the coaching staff, he just flat out said they had to coach better. He obviously spread around to everybody saying players got to execute better, but you could tell he was putting the onus of the blame for this game on the coaching staff. And a good coach should do that, especially after what all happened in this season opener against the Tar Heels. So where does the blame exactly lie, though? In what areas? Well, here's the first area that I think of. Shane Beamer and the staff deserve some blame from what, in my opinion, is a rash of misevaluations in terms of some of these portal offensive linemen that they brought in. I would think that this staff did not just go after a Jackson Hughes, a Sidney Fugar, Nick Gargiulo, Nye Manziel, all those guys. I would think that they went after more than just those 4 or 5 guys. But honestly, out of the 4 or 5 they brought in, only one of them really held their own, in my opinion, on Saturday night, and it was Nick Gargiulo. So for Shane Beamer, the question that I would throw out there is, did y'all not go after any bigger names? Did you not make a big enough push for some of these bigger targets in the portal? I believe there's a guy, Connor Britton, offensive lineman for Western Kentucky, was from the state of South Carolina, was like a 4-star transfer portal prospect. He went to Auburn. Did y'all not make a big enough push for a guy like that? Or did you look at the guys that you did bring in and say, those are the guys you want? Because if you answer yes to either of those questions, we need to start questioning your use of the portal, and we need to start questioning your evaluations in terms of portal offensive linemen. Because again, one game in, it looks like y'all swung and missed on the majority of these guys. It does. Looking at running back, I alluded to this earlier. This running back room, again, just based on one game, there's no real game. There's no game breaker. I love the Kerryon Joyner. And to carry on, again, I'm willing to admit for sure he did not get a fair chance on a lot of those running plays on Saturday night. But even when he did have a chance, when he was in open space, he had one guy in front of him. I didn't see him break really any tackles, and I didn't see him shake any guys loose. I didn't see that happen at all. And the really good running backs make that happen. So this idea that Dakereon Jordan was going to have a just game-breaking type season, he was going to be like an offensive MVP for this team. Maybe I'm just completely wrong. Maybe they just completely turned things around in that area. But it's pretty clear that we overvalued some of these positives and undervalued some of these negatives coming into this season. So I'm not going to continue to do that anymore. Not after what happened on Saturday. No, sir. Not going to do it. You lost a lot of guys in this 2022 recruiting cycle. Ramon Brown, Jalen Glover, 2 targets that you missed out on. And then you had some really bad luck this offseason. Marshawn Lloyd transfers to Southern Cal. Lavassier Carroll medically retires from the game of football. I believe Rashad Amos transferred. That one wasn't really surprising. Christian Bill Smith graduates. Eligibility is exhausted. So it's not all on the staff what happened with the running back position, but it is partly on them without a question. They are bringing in Matthew Fuller. You have got to get Daniel Hill by any means necessary. You can't lose out on him. If you lose out on him, this running back position is not going to see a significant jump this next year. It's just not. You better hope Dontavius Braswell is ready soon. Because in my opinion, in terms of somehow alleviating some of the run blocking woes at the running back position, giving this team a chance, a fighting chance, he's the one guy that can do it because he's got a game-breaking aspect that none of these other guys have, and it is speed. He might not break all the tackles, but doggone it, he can outrun the majority of the defenders that they face. So I think that you need Dontavius Braswell to make some strides very quickly and put him out there on the field. Defensive coaching. Clayton White. We're in year 3 now. Where's the rush defense? Rush defense is supposed to be a pillar of this program. It's what they touted about you as a coach. Where is it? 1 tackle for loss against a North Carolina team that, again, that unit gave up 40 sacks last year. I know that doesn't correlate to run blocking, but typically, if you got a unit that's that bad in one area, they're probably overall not a very good unit. And it's not like that you lack star power. Again, Tonka Hemingway is supposed to be an all-SEC type player. You bring in a Travian Robertson, who we all were thinking was an upgrade. I'm certainly not going to go back on that notion. But at this point, I think it's coaching. Something's going on with this scheme. Something's going on with the mentality of this defense. I don't know what it is. I can't pinpoint it, but I can say this. We're 3 years in now. If not now, then when? Y'all have got to fix this. South Carolina, they are at their best when their defense is leading the charge. They are. Historically, that's always the way they've been. This defense has been nothing to be proud of for like the last decade now. Minus 1 or 2 decent seasons. This can't continue. I'll just end it with that. This can't continue. And the last thing that I'm really starting to question, this grueling summer and physical fall camp that got talked about so much by Shane Beamer. And I mean, it got discussed a lot. There were a lot of guys that got hurt on Saturday. A lot of guys. Shane Beamer could not even recall all the guys that left the game in his post-game press conference. He couldn't. He recalled a few of them, but he couldn't recall all of them. That's obviously not ideal if your head coach is in that kind of spot in a press conference. I know this is a very physical sport. I would know because I played this sport. No, I didn't play college ball at any level. I played just high school ball. But I have an idea. I had knee issues. I had all sorts of injuries my senior year. You're going to get hurt. Guys are going to get dinged up. They're never going to be playing 100%. I know that. I'm not naive to that. But when you put guys through the ringer like Shane Beamer has alluded to over the past couple months, and then you have your first game, and yes, some of these injuries are freak injuries like Case and Henry's. I really hope that injury is not serious. Hope he's able to come back soon. But some of these other guys going down as easily as they did, what are we doing in practice? I know, and I don't want to scare y'all, but I will say this. This is reminiscent of another coach that this program used to have that talked about how physical their practices were, that it was almost like a point of pride with him and his staff. And what did we always see? We always saw a bunch of guys get dinged up. By the end of the year, it was like a literal laundry list of players that were not able to go out there on the field because of how many injuries we had. So I'm just saying, we've heard a lot about how grueling this offseason was for this team. What did y'all go over the line a little bit? I don't question Luke Day. I think that man knows what he's doing. I think he and his staff, they train those guys the right way. I could talk for a whole nother hour on what all he does. I don't think it's him and his staff. I just want to say that at the forefront. But you might want to rethink your strategy in terms of just killing these guys in practice next year. If that is what you did, which is what you alluded to, and now we're seeing all these injuries pile up that fast. I get it, injuries happen, freak accidents happen. That many in the first week of the season, I've got questions about your philosophy in terms of how physical you're being in practice. I do. So, y'all, that's what I had to say really about this game. I am going to end this show in a little bit. I do, however, see a ton of comments. So what I am going to do, I am going to go through some of these. And any questions that y'all may have thrown out there, I'm not going to get to all of them. I'm going to tell you all that right now. I'm just not. I don't have the time. But I'm going to touch on these as much as I can. Let's see. Rattler's play was awesome considering the O-line was atrocious. Yes, agree. Rattler was amazing. You warned me O-line was going to be, yeah. But admittedly, I didn't even think the O-line was going to be this bad. I'm serious about that. I never would have suspected they would have been this bad. DK definitely did not get as good of a chance as he deserved. It's not all on him. It's not all on him. Going to be a long season. Chris, yes, it is. You better buckle up. I don't think it's going to be the year that some of y'all may have hoped. No Desmond, no Marquis. Nick did play on Saturday night. He did get out there some. Now, he might have had the same situation as Juice where he wasn't 100%. I'm totally willing to leave that out there. So, you know how I feel about Clayton. Yep. You've definitely nailed that several times. Kilgore did great. Props to Jaylon Kilgore. If I didn't say that, yeah, Kilgore deserves a ton of credit. That kid's going to be a stud back there. That safety position is certainly deep, and thank gosh they got him because he was needed on Saturday. Let's see. Legette played like a boss. He absolutely did. He owned North Carolina's secondary. Furman is no App State. They certainly aren't, but we can't listen. South Carolina cannot sleep on Furman. If they do, they're going to be in a dogfight on Saturday. I'm telling y'all right now. I haven't watched any of Furman's film. I haven't looked at their roster. I haven't done any of that. South Carolina cannot sleep on Furman. After what they did against North Carolina, they can't sleep on anyone this season. They can't. Legette was certainly the man. Let's see. Where was Eddie Lewis? Good question. Good question. Let's see. Yeah, Spencer Rattler, a couple of times he did sit in the pocket maybe a little bit longer than you would have liked, but he definitely, again, as the game went on, he was doing phenomenal in terms of his pocket navigation awareness. What's going to happen when we start playing SEC teams? Bad things are going to happen, and I'll leave it at that. Let's see. Legette was limping. Great point. Legette played hurt. Goes back to wide receiver depth. I'm telling y'all, if that position group was deeper, Legette shouldn't be out there having to play on basically what looked like 1 3/4 hamstrings. I'm not trying to speculate. He was grabbing, though, I think, at the back of his hamstring, one of his legs. Should Beamer leave? No. Saturday night was bad, but let's not start conversations about Shane Beamer possibly needing to go. The man's proven that he has a lot of potential here. You cannot just turn on him after one game. Can't do that. Let's see. Doty is the soldier one on your side. 1,000% agree with that. What happened to the tight ends? Great question. I think part of it does relate back to pass protection. Fortune and Dow played pretty well. No pressure. They were trying to cover for way too long. Certainly fair to say that. Secondary, it's not all their fault. Some of the completions that did happen, especially on third downs, because at some point the defensive front's got to help them. No question about that. It's payback season. So, geez, Tennessee fan coming in here. Y'all better pray for a bowl. I won't fully dispute that. How much did Beamer cost? Okay, yeah. Apparently some Tennessee fan having a lot of fun in here. Joe Milton didn't exactly look all that great in the first half, Bucko. It's not like your team is without problems. We're not going to get Vanderbilt as it looks. Again, let's not go that far. But until Beamer can stack 3 or 4 top 20 recruiting classes, this offensive line, I should have said this earlier, the offensive line issues are not all on the staff. Transfer portal evaluations, that's on them. That is 1,000% on them. They've also, though, had some lackluster recruiting classes that preceded their arrival that they're in the process of trying to fix. They probably wish Cam Pringle, Josiah Thompson could have gotten here yesterday. 2025 also looks like a good crop. The staff deserves a chance to rectify the issues up front. Let's see. Too busy doing TikTok videos. Again, let's not just fully flip on Beamer after one really bad game. And it was a bad game. It was. But we can't just flip on him like that. Beamer is a master at keeping the team motivated. Good point. And look, Beamer has shown these teams get better. At least they had the last couple years. This one might be more of a challenge, admittedly, because this schedule is daunting. Offensive line, yeah, we've hit that 1,000 times. What else? I listened to the coaches for insight, and they hurt the trust for sure. And that is part of their job, admittedly. We can't expect these coaches to take truth elixirs before they go out in front of these microphones and speak to us and talk to us. We just can't. And that's why it's very hard to analyze what all they say. I tried my very best, but I'm clearly not, an expert. I mean, I'd be a private investigator in another world if I was good enough at analyzing what these coaches were saying. Because clearly, I'm hit or miss. I'm willing to admit that. It's tough. It's tough to really just sift through the weeds of what all they say and what you should really focus on. If we were just somewhat better in the lines, we could challenge Georgia. Yeah, we're nowhere near close ready to challenge Georgia. That's why people that were saying I think we can beat Georgia, I have not been jumping on board with that. They're not ready. Wait a couple years. This offensive line is nowhere near close. Atkins was the key player in many wins, no question. Dude was a Swiss Army knife. O-line is still playing at a 4A high school level. They have to step it up. Carson cued the Tennessee fan said, "That's right, y'all deserve better." Carson, appreciate that comment. Seriously, from an opposing fan, appreciate that comment there. The coach can only get them together, but the players got to want it, meaning if you get slapped to the mouth, have resilience and bounce back. No disputing that. That is for sure. So many injuries could point to a problem of your strength conditioning programming too, not just issues with program. I don't think this is a Luke Day problem. I don't think it's a Luke Day problem. He trains these guys a lot differently than most of these other strength coaches. And from the exercise science background that I do have from college, yes, I was an exercise science major at South Carolina. The way he's training them, in my opinion, is one of the best ways to train today's athletes. It is. I would not question him. When you compound that, though, with a grueling practice style, that's where you can have problems. The human body can only take so much wear and tear. Charmin Ultra Soft, D-line and O-line. Certain aspects I can't fully dispute. Oh gosh, wow. Okay, got even more comments. Let's see. They're not running backs. Number 5 should not be running anything. Again, Joyner, the problem is he needs to be in a perfect situation. If he had an offensive line that could allow him to run north-south, Joyner, in my opinion, would look so much better running back, and then we'd be talking glowingly about him. I acknowledge that for sure, but he doesn't have enough help, and so it's not going to look good at all. Again, that's why I think Braswell, you need to hope that he gets ready quicker than expected. How do you fail to bring in a running back from the portal or college? Portal recruiting at running back can certainly be questioned here, no doubt. Did not see any pride. I've seen a South Carolina D line come through unblocked and watch their running back go behind. We did bring one in, top 2 in Division II. Not sure why he doesn't play. Maybe it's because he's 5'11", 190. Yeah. I hope we can fix it. Hope it was first game jitters. We always take 3 games to start rolling. Why isn't Clayton White being held accountable? I would say after Saturday, he's being held a lot more accountable by the fan base. And I've said this before as well. This is a prove-it year for Clayton White. I mean, again, if not now, then when? How can DK run the ball when the defense was in the backfield with him, not DK? William, again, some of those plays weren't DK's fault, but he also had chances in the open field one-on-one against defenders. Those situations, you can't put that on the line. DK at some point's got to make guys miss one way or another. I didn't see that. Did not see that at all on Saturday. Let's see here. Okay. Looks like that's pretty much it. And this has gotten a little bit long at this point. So with all that being said, that does it for this live reaction edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. Thank y'all so much for tuning in to today's show. If you're a Gamecock fan, look, I know that it's probably been a tough night, tough morning and afternoon. Let me down below in the comments section. What were your thoughts on this game? How worried are you about the team potentially after what all we saw and looking ahead to the rest of the 2023 season? Do you think that any certain changes need to be made? I will not hear anything about Shane Beamer needing to go. Again, that is 1,000% overreaction. Maybe starting lineup changes and all that. Yeah, that needs to be considered without question. But again, let me know your thoughts in the comment section on YouTube or shoot me a direct message on Twitter if you get your audio podcast daily. If you listen to us on audio podcast, I should say. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Sunday, and I'll be right back here on Monday with more thoughts on what the Gamecocks need to do moving forward. I'll catch y'all on the next show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast.